Hello, readers. Welcome back to Reads with Room B. Today we are continuing with Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, Chapter 4. The Rabbit Sends in a Little Bill. It was the White Rabbit, trotting slowly back again, and looking anxious about it as it went, as if it had lost something, and she heard it muttering to itself, "The Duchess! The Duchess! Oh, my dear paws! Oh, my fur and whiskers shall get me executed as sure as ferrets are ferrets! Where can I have dropped them, I wonder?" Alice guessed in a moment that it was looking for the fan and a pair of white kid gloves, and she very good-naturedly began hunting about for them, but they were nowhere to be seen. Everything, it seemed to have changed since her swim in the pool, and the great hall and the glass table with the little door had vanished completely. Very soon the White Rabbit noticed Alice as she went hunting about, and called out to her in an angry tone, "Why, Mary Ann! What are you doing out here? Run home this moment and fetch me my pair of gloves and a fan. Quick now! Quick!" Alice was so much frightened that she ran off at once in the direction it pointed to, without trying to explain the mistake it had made. "He took me for his housemaid," she said to herself as she ran. "How surprised he'll be when he finds out who I am. I'd better take him his fan and gloves, that is, if I can find them." As soon as she said this, she came upon a neat little house. On the door was a very bright brass plate with the name W. Rabbit engraved upon it. She went in without knocking and hurried upstairs, in great fear lest she should meet the real Mary Ann and be turned out of the house before she had found the fan and gloves. "How queer it seems," Alice said to herself, "to be going messages for a rabbit. I suppose Dinah will be sending me on messages next." She began fancying the sort of thing that would happen. "Miss Alice, come here directly, and get ready for your walk." "Coming in a minute, nurse, but I've got to watch this mouse hole till Dinah comes back, you see, and see to it that the mouse doesn't get out. Only, I don't think," Alice went on, "that they'd let Dinah stop in the house if she began ordering people about like that." And by this time she had found her way into a tiny little room with a table at the window, and on it, as she'd hoped, was a fan and 2 or 3 pairs of tiny white kid gloves even. She took up the fan and the pair of gloves, and was just going to leave the room when her eye fell upon a little bottle that stood near the looking-glass. There was no label on it this time. There was no label on it this time with the words "Drink me," but nevertheless she uncorked it and put it to her lips. "I know something interesting is sure to happen," she said to herself, "whenever I eat or drink anything. So I'll just see what this bottle does, and I hope it'll make me grow large again, for I'm really quite tired of being such a tiny little thing." And indeed so, and much sooner than she had expected. Before she had drunk half the bottle, she found her head pressed against the ceiling, and had to stoop to save her neck from being broken. And this is Alice in the White Rabbit's room after drinking the bottle. She hastily put the bottle down, saying to herself, "That's quite enough. I hope I shan't grow any more. As it is, I can't get out the door." Oh, 2 seconds, readers. Sorry about that. That's quite enough. I hope I shan't grow any more. As it is, I can't get out. I can't get at the door. I do wish I hadn't quite drunk as much." Alas, it was too late for that wish. She went on growing, and very soon had to kneel down on the floor. In another minute there was not even room for this, and she tried the effect of laying down. with one elbow against the door and the other arm curled around her head, and still she went on growing. And at last, as a last resource, she put an arm out the window and one foot out the chimney. And said to herself, "Now I can do no more. Whatever happens, what will become of me?" Luckily for Alice, the little magic ball had now had its full effect, and she grew no larger. Still, it was very uncomfortable, and there seemed to be no sort of chance of her ever getting out of the room again. No wonder she felt unhappy. It was much pleasanter at home, thought poor Alice, when one wasn't always growing larger and smaller, and being ordered about by mice and rabbits. I almost wish I hadn't gone down that rabbit hole. And yet, it's rather curious, this sort of life. I do wonder what can have happened to me. When I used to read fairy tales, I fancied that kind of thing never happened, and now here I am in the middle of one. There ought to be a book written about me. There ought. And when I grow up, I'll write one. But I'm grown up now," she added in a sorrowful tone. "At least, there's no room to grow up any more here." But then, thought Alice, shall I never get any older than I am now? That'll be a comfort one way. I'll never be an old woman. But then always to have to learn lessons. Oh, I shouldn't like that. "Oh, you foolish Alice," she answered herself. "How can you learn lessons in here? Why, there's hardly room for you. There's no room for any lesson books." And she went on, taking first one side and then the other, and making quite a conversation of it altogether. But after a few minutes she heard a voice outside, and stopped to listen. "Mary Ann! Mary Ann!" said the voice. "Fetch me my gloves this minute." And then came pattering of little feet on the stairs, and Alice knew it was the rabbit coming to look for her, and she trembled till the house shook, quite forgetting that she was about 1,000 times as large as the rabbit, and had no reason to be afraid of it. Presently the rabbit came up to the door and tried to open it, but as the door opened inwards and Alice's elbow was pressed hard against it, that attempt proved a failure. Alice heard it say to itself, "Then I'll go around and get in at the window." "That you won't," thought Alice, and after waiting till she fancied she heard the rabbit just under the window, she suddenly spread out her hand and made a snatch in the air. She didn't get a hold of anything, but she heard a little shriek, and a fall, and a crash of broken glass, from which she concluded that it was just possible it had fallen into a cucumber frame, or something of that sort. Next came an angry voice, the rabbit's. "Pat! Pat! Where are you?" And then a voice she had never heard before. "Sure then, I'm here, diggin' for apples, your honor." "Diggin' for apples indeed," the rabbit said angrily. Come here and help me out of this." Sounds of more broken glass. "Now tell me, Pat, what's that in the window?" Sure, it's an arm, your honor." He pronounced it "arm." "An arm, you goose. Who ever saw one that size? Why, it fills the whole window." Sure it does, your honor. But that's an arm for sure." "Well, it's got no business there at any rate. Go and take it away." There was a long silence after this, and Alice could only hear whispers now, and then, as such, "Sure, I don't like it, your honor, your honor, sir. Not at all, not at all." "Do as I tell you, you coward." And at last she spread out her hand again and made another snatch in the air, and this time there were two little shrieks, and more sounds of broken glass. What a number of cucumber frames there must be, thought Alice. I wonder what they'll do next. As for pulling me out the window, I only wish they could. I'm sure I don't want to stay here any longer. She waited for some time without hearing anything. At last came a rumbling of a little cartwheels, and the sound of a good many voices all talking together. She made out words. "Where's the other ladder? Why, I hadn't thought to bring one. Bill's got the other. Bill, fetch it here, lad. Here, put 'em up at this corner. No, tie 'em together first. They don't reach half high enough yet. Oh, they'll do well enough. Don't be particular. Here, Bill, catch the hold of this rope. Will the roof bear? Mind that loose slate. Oh, it's coming down. Heads below! A loud crash. Now who did that? It was Bill, I fancy. Who's to go down the chimney? Nay, I shan't do it. That I won't, then. Bill's got to go down here, Bill. The master says you've got to go down the chimney. Oh, so Bill's coming down the chimney, has he? Alice said to herself. Well, why? They seem to put everything upon Bill. I wouldn't want to be in Bill's place for a good deal. This fireplace is narrow, to be sure, and I think I can kick it a little. She drew her foot as far down the chimney as she could, and waited until she heard the little animal. She couldn't guess what sort it was, scratching and scrambling about the chimney close above her, and then she heard to herself, "This is Bill." She gave one sharp kick, and waited to see what would happen next. The first thing she heard was a general chorus of "There goes Bill," and then the rabbit's voice alone, "Catch him, you, by the hedge," and then silence, and then another confusion of voices. "Hold up his head, now, Brandy, now, don't choke him. How was it, old fellow? What happened to you? Tell us all about it." The last came in a little feeble squeaking voice. "That's Bill," thought Alice. "Well, I hardly know, no more than thank ye. I'm better now, but I'm a deal too flustered to tell you. All I know is, something comes at me like a jack-in-the-box, and up I goes like a skyrocket." "So you did, old fellow, so you did. We must burn down the house," said the rabbit. Alice called out, as loud as she could, "If you do, I'll set dynamite on you." There was a dead silence instantly, and Alice thought to herself, "I wonder what they'll do next. If they'd had any sense, they'd take the roof off." After a minute or two, they began moving about again, and Alice heard the rabbit say, "A barrowful will do, to begin with." "A barrowful of what?" thought Alice, but she had not long to doubt, for the next moment a shower of little pebbles came rattling down on the window. Some hit her in the face. "I'll put a stop to this," she said to herself, and shouted out, "You better not do that again," which produced another dead silence. Alice noticed with some surprise that the pebbles were all turning into little cakes, as they lay on the floor, and a bright idea came into her head. "If I eat one of these cakes," she thought, I'm sure to make some change in my size. As it can't possibly make me any larger, it must make me smaller, I suppose." So she swallowed one of the cakes. It was delighted, and was delighted to find that she began shrieking directly. And as soon as she was small enough to get through the door, she ran out of the house, and found quite a crowd of little animals and birds waiting outside. The poor little lizard, Bill, was in the middle, being held up by 2 guinea pigs, who were giving it something out of a bowl. They all made a mad rush at Alice the moment she appeared, but she ran off as hard as she could, and soon found herself safe in a thick wood. "The first thing I've got to do," said Alice to herself as she wandered about in the woods, "is grow to my right size again. The second thing I have to do is find my way into that lovely garden. I think that would be the best plan." It sounded an excellent plan, and no doubt, and very neatly and simply arranged. The only difficulty was that she hadn't the smallest idea how to set about it, and while she was peering anxiously about the trees, a sharp little bark just over her head made her look up in a great hurry. An enormous puppy was looking down at her with large round eyes, and feebly stretching out one paw, trying to touch her. "Poor little thing," said Alice in a coaxing tone. She tried hard to whistle, but she was terribly frightened all the time at the thought that it might be hungry, in which case it would very likely eat her all up, in spite of her coaxing. Hardly knowing what she did, she picked up a bit of a stick and held it out to the puppy, whereupon the puppy jumped off into the air, with all of its feet at once, with a light yelp of delight, and rushed at the stick, and made believe to worry it. And then Alice dodged behind a great thistle to keep herself from being run over, and at the moment she appeared on the other side, the puppy made another rush at the stick, and tumbled head over heels in its hurry to get a hold of it. And then Alice, thinking this was very like having a game of play with a cart horse, and expecting every moment to be trampled under its feet, ran round the thistle again, and the puppy began a series of short charges at the stick, running a very little way forward each time, and then a long way back, and barking hoarsely all the while, till at last it sat down a good way off, panting, with its tongue hanging out of its mouth, and its eyes half shut. This seemed to Alice a good opportunity to making her escape, so she set off at once, ran until she was quite tired and out of breath, until the puppy's bark sounded quite faint in the distance. "And yet, what a dear little puppy it was," said Alice, as she leaned against the buttercup to rest herself, and she fanned herself with one of the leaves. "I should have liked very much teaching it tricks, if only I'd been the right size to do it. Oh dear, I'd nearly forgotten that I'd grown again. Let me see, how is it managed? I suppose I ought to eat or drink something here, or other. But the great question is, what?" And the great question certainly was, what? Alice looked all around her at the flowers and the blades of grass, but she could not see anything that looked right now like a thing to eat or drink under the circumstances. There was a rather large mushroom growing near her, about the same height as herself, and when she looked under it, and on both sides of it, and behind it, it occurred to her that she might as well look on top of it. She stretched herself tippy-toe and peeped over the edge of the mushroom, and immediately her eyes met those of a large blue caterpillar that was sitting on top with its arms folded, quietly smoking a long hookah, and taking not the smallest notice of her nor anyone else. And that is chapter 4. I shall see you next time. Keep reading.